It's 1 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another One Soccer Player Pundit Hangout. We're getting rid of the players today. Friday seems to be our media day. Josh Kloke from The Athletic joins us today for a deep dive on Toronto FC, joined by fellow and former Toronto FC beat reporters Kurt Larson and Oliver Platt. I'm Adam Jenkins. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. We are about to bid adieu to another week of social isolation, and Kurt seems to think that we're going to be doing this for a while.
I'm just listening to the experts, which everybody should be. But I did learn something last night. Trying to support local business here in the East End. I went to a lovely establishment called Occasions. Shout out to Occasions, a Leslieville staple. And at the end of my order over the phone, they asked if I wanted any beer or wine to go, which was news to me that apparently now you can take out beer and wine. I guess extreme circumstances call for extreme measures, but that was interesting. So maybe I'll be utilizing that. Maybe I'll be utilizing that down the road. What's that, Josh?
So what'd you get?
I didn't get anything because before I came into isolation, I stocked my under my stairs there. There's a little storage area that one day will be my little boys' play area. But for now, has 2 30 packs.
Play area. Is it just still chock full of Michelob Ultra? Are you still working on that?
I am still working on it. It's taken more of a dent than I would like to admit, but it's still there.
Well, there we have it. Josh, what
is that not news? Is that not news to you guys?
No, it's not.
No, not at all.
No.
I didn't know that.
There you go.
Well, you don't have to take his side every single time, man. Come on.
I'm just saying I didn't know that.
Yeah. You can take it out now.
What's your alcoholic stockpile right now, Mr. Kloke?
Good question. I was planning today on braving a move across the street to the LCBO. My wife and I shared more text than we usually do, trying to decide on what kind of beer we should kind of line the fridge with. And the few cases we got I'm kind of looking now, they're dwindling. There's a lot of red wine that we haven't gotten into yet, but the beer is dwindling, and I think we have an LCBO right across the street, but which is good because we can just kind of look outside and see like what the lineup outside looks like. So we can dip in whenever we need to. But no, the stockpile of brown bottles is dwindling, and we have a Zoom trivia night tonight with some friends, so we'll probably need to strange saying these kind of things out loud, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
I think
very odd.
Strategically, though, the reason I went with Michelob Ultra is because it's light and refreshing, but also I feared if I went for the more high percentage IPAs, it wouldn't be good for me.
No, I agree. We literally have to kind of keep an eye on each other, and 5 o'clock when when our son starts getting a bit restless, that's when we dip into our first beer, and it's usually something tasty, and then the brown bottles are those are used depending on those are used depending on how bad bedtime was. So
yeah,
a lot of new strategy that goes in.
Oliver, you'll get there.
Yeah, I can't really chime in on this conversation yet.
Well, consider yourself lucky.
It's amazing how. Did any of you ever use or have heard of Zoom before coronavirus?
No, I do get a lot more annoying emails from them though now, asking how they can help make the service better. But I don't know. Like the service is fine for me. So quit trying to upsell me. Quit trying to upsell me, Zoom. Quit trying to upsell me.
It's like those phantom emails you get from restaurants you visited one time 7 years ago, and they're like, "Hey, just wanted to let you know what our COVID-19 response is because I know you're really worried about it."
Yeah.
Subject line is always a message from our 19.
Why are we talking about Zoom? Adam, let's go. What are we doing?
Because we're on Zoom, Kurt. Are they not a proud sponsor of One Soccer at this point?
No,
or are we just gifting them our money for free? Unbelievable. Okay, back to TFC, or to TFC, I should say. We're in a very unique position today to have the three of you here. It's a pretty dense contingent of former and current Toronto FC beat reporters. So we're going to go all over the past and present. Kurt, from when you started to up until now. Josh being a current insider for them, writing for The Athletic. And that's the first thing I want to ask you about.
I don't know.
Oh, I'm trying to pump your tires, man. Go along.
I don't know. Insider only when they return my phone calls.
Oh, shout out.
I feel like that's an inside joke, but I can appreciate what's going on there. What is life like right now for the Athletic? I feel like on one hand, the viewership's probably up a little bit considering people are just so desperate for content. But how have things changed, if at all, for you and your filings and what your strategy is at the Athletic?
Well, I mean, it's changed a lot, right? But what I've really enjoyed is getting super creative and probably writing those stories that like you kind of dream up after 3 or 4 brown bottles, and you're like, then in the light of day, you're like, oh, I don't know if that would work or not. And now you have all this time and space to do these kind of things. So you get creative and you write the stories that probably are best suited for the off season. And I think more and more we're kind of treating it like an off season, which is strange for TFC considering they got 2 games in. But at least with the other sports, I think more and more it'll be treated like that, and then kind of writing about sports and culture and sports movies. I'm doing a few things on sports and music. So yeah, you get creative. But for TFC especially, like they were just getting going and they had a very small sample size of games for us to look at. So that'll be kind of strange to consider because MLS, everybody's wondering what they're going to do. Like there's been talk of them maybe just doing the entire season from August through to May, or maybe just like adopting the FIFA calendar. I know there's been talk of that. I don't know, Ollie, what do you think about that, moving to the FIFA calendar for MLS?
Yeah, it would be interesting. I don't really know how it would work in terms of climate, right? Like obviously the big issue is that
Sure.
Montreal has to start in that dump at the Olympic Stadium, and TFC
Hey,
have had to
be nice.
TFC have had to have road trips before, and obviously there's a lot of teams that would struggle to play home games during the winter. So yeah, I can't see them doing that. I think I don't know. I don't get the impression that Garber really wants to go to the
I don't think so either.
calendar.
Well, isn't the idea that you have to compete a little bit more with the NFL and college? And that's something I don't think anybody wants to do. I think Major League Soccer has that little window where it's not just them, but at least there's less going on in the summer months. But I mean, they might have to, right? They might have to change something.
You put your playoffs up against the NBA and NHL as well, right? So yeah.
It's certainly interesting. There's so many unknowns. In terms of your work with the team, covering them, have you found that they're a lot more receptive and maybe more enthusiastic to these sort of off-kilter, untraditional ideas? Because it seemed like at first all of the leagues and a lot of the teams within them were sort of hesitant, like, oh, we're not sure how long this is going to last, so we're just going to we're going to hush the media for now. We're just going to wait it out, see what's going on. And once we've all sort of collectively realized this is going to be a 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 month process if seasons don't get canceled across North America. So have you found the response and the reception to these sort of stories has changed with them?
I think so. But I mean, like a lot of people, everybody just has time on their hands. So like, it used to be a matter of trying to talk to players in that small window after training and, between that and the time that they wanted to just quickly get out of there. So I think, yeah, as time goes on, people will be more keen to just talking about strange things, because that's kind of what we're all doing now, is pondering the meaning of life and talking about things that we never would have before. But I do think it's still early for MLS. I think there's a lot of hope that they can kind of salvage the season in some way. I don't know. I'm curious to see how they go about it, because it's starting to feel more and more like the other leagues, the NBA and the NHL, are kind of thinking, well, should we just go straight into the playoffs? But MLS is thinking about how do we get a full season, right? Because they're really dependent on the gate, and losing more and more games hurts the league.
I think at this point, it seems like it'd be impossible to get a full regular season. I mean, I just saw it came out today that there's now a moratorium through the start of July, right?
Yes.
So you're looking at, if they revert back to trying to have a final early December, you're looking at potentially having 5 months to cram in a regular season plus play. Looking at a shortened season. I mean, how many games that ends up being, that's going to be the interesting question. And then do you cut down the size of the playoffs? How does that operate? But at this point, how many months would you say they actually need in order to not cancel the entire season? Is it 4 months? Is it 5 months? I mean, 4 months you'd think would be the absolute lowest they would need in order to do something, right?
And then you start to wonder if they could go into what the Premier League has been kind of planning, which is just to have a big tournament, essentially, right? Like, so the Premier League is going to finish its or may finish its season that way. MLS could maybe look at doing that just as something. I don't know if you'd really crown a legitimate champion, but you could at least have some games on, you know, in the last 2 or 3 months of the year, based in some kind of knockout format. I don't know, but
yeah.
Puts a lot of pressure on Pablo Piatti then, doesn't it?
It does. So I don't think
He better be healthy by the end of this.
It's not good for TFC if it is a really compressed schedule, because this is an older team that, you know,
Sure.
they really put a lot of thought into mapping out the rest that they're going to give players and how they kind of structure those minutes. So that would be a good thing for them.
I think they're probably hoping they can get back by July. You know, if they could play, is it 24 games possible to get in there and plus playoffs? I don't know, but I mean, that would be, you would think, the best case scenario at the moment.
I don't know. I would think you would shorten the season and just have a longer playoff run. Like the MLS has always struggled with what kind of schedule or works best for them, and I kind of like the new format. But yeah, like if you're gonna like look at the NBA, who wants to like have that tournament and turn it into like, you know, hopefully big TV revenue, because there's so much interest in kind of a March Madness type thing. Like, why not focus on that? It definitely doesn't help TFC. You're right, Ollie. Like, this is an old team, and I think I said this last year, but this seemed like very much the last kick at the can for this core.
It never quite is.
No, I think I was saying that in 2018 too.
Yeah,
So, no, I don't know. I think July is even wildly optimistic at this point.
Yeah.
Which I hate saying out loud. Like, it's just, you're coming to terms with the fact that like this is going to be a really long haul.
Well, if we're talking realistically as well, I mean, we all know that right now there are certain leagues that are based on butts and seats, and the ticket revenue is extremely important. I think the NHL is in that boat just a little bit. I mean, unless you're the NBA and the NFL, where the TV money is absolutely massive, you know, would an MLS, you know, have to consider, even if we do come back in July, what is going to be the reception to fans filling our stadiums, and then is that worth it?
Yeah, because all it would take is one or two players to kind of get infected in a large public setting for, you know, for it to look like a massive mistake. For TFC, this is where being owned by MLSE really, really, really helps them, right? Because they're not a small market club. They can survive something like this. Just like, you know, you mentioned the NHL, there are some small market teams that are already laying off people, that have already, you know, full-time employees and management have taken pay cuts. I don't think you're going to see that yet at TFC, because again, you being backed by MLSE allows you that kind of financial freedom and flexibility that has helped them bring in huge stars and have the biggest payroll for the last few seasons. So small market teams, absolutely. But I think TFC right now are in pretty good shape. Again, we'll see how long this goes.
Yeah, and that's a bigger conversation too, because I mean, not every club is bankrolled by three of the biggest franchises in North America. I mean, we're seeing the KHL in Russia already. They've lost two teams already who said we're done. Like, already after a month, they will not be able to afford to play again next season. And I think the longer this goes on, we're going to see clubs, especially in Europe and the lower tiers, where that continues to become fine to say that at this point, for all of the leagues, their main focus is obviously health and safety of the players. But aside from that, it's recouping as much money as possible, because they're going to take a loss. So I think in a lot of ways, you're going to see a lot of the leagues throw out what's normal. And they're just going to say, this isn't a normal year. There's no way we're going to have a semblance of normalcy. So whether it is the tournament idea or any way to make revenue, is that now the main focus for them? Or should we expect that to be, to recoup as much as possible?
Like the faster that leagues and teams start shifting like the way they think about this season and just shifting their entire paradigm, like this is going to cause ripples through the economy, I imagine. I'm no expert, for a very, very long time. So as soon as they stop thinking about, right, how can we salvage this season, and more thinking about how can we create a new way to think about the season and seasons moving forward. Like, I don't think this is just a 2020 season type thing. I think you're going to see, like you're already seeing, I know it's not super comparable, but you're already seeing one team in the KHL who's had to just, close up shop for next season because they're like, we've already taken such a loss. So I think it wouldn't surprise me to see some teams being affected in that way, not just this season, but far beyond.
Yeah, this is and one thing that just came to mind, I'll just throw this out there as well, is I wonder how the lack of charter flights within MLS also could impact travel between venues. Do they bring in something to have charter flights? Can they afford that? Because that's something to consider, I guess, too, with how swift the league's going to come back.
It's a shame too, because I liked the look of the new CBA for the players. Like, I thought there was a lot in the new MLS CBA that worked in the players' advantage, including the travel, including like not no more, but far fewer restrictions on salary. Like, that's the direction they should be heading. And I don't think we're going to get a really good, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's amendments to the CBA in light of this. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think it's uncharted waters. And the gate's a good point to bring up too, because even if, let's say, July 1st, the world is back to normal, you're still going to have people who are afraid of going to public events, even when they're told they're allowed to. So they're going to be reluctant to go gather with all of these people, not to mention all the people that have lost their jobs and are living off EI. So that disposable income that you would have to go to 5 or 6 games, maybe you can only go to 1 or 2 now because you just can't afford to get into the gate in the first place. So lots of ripple effects for sure.
Yeah, I think we're coming back to empty stadiums for sure. Like, I think these leagues, and not just MLS, but most leagues, will want to get going in some way, probably before it is fully safe for everyone to do so. So for me, we'd be looking at empty stadiums there, and that has all kinds of implications, as the other guys have mentioned already.
This is more of a question out of my curiosity, because I'm certainly not as familiar with the MLS CBA as I am with certain other things. But what's the revenue sharing situation like in the MLS versus some of the other leagues, where I know that NBA, NFL, for example, a lot of these smaller teams really rely on the big clubs where they share some of that revenue. What's that situation like in MLS?
Anyone?
Are we familiar at all?
Anyone?
I can't say I'm super up to speed with the new CBA, but I'm fairly sure it's a similar system to the other major leagues. There is a significant degree of revenue sharing, right?
Yeah, I think let's I think the reason all of us are a little bit stumped on that question is because historically MLS hasn't really wanted to give a ton of information about such things to reporters, right? I mean,
right.
I think the NBA, NFL, NBA, even NHL, they've reached a point, or they eventually did, where they're quite open about all these things, whereas for decades, Major League Soccer has tried to hide as much as possible in terms of salaries and salary caps and how much they pay people and rules, right? So it might just be a case of that information not even being out there, and what is the revenue share and the breakdown and all that stuff.
Well, yeah, I guess it's not really revenue sharing so much as it's all one business, technically, right? Like, it's single entity.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
But you're right, Kurt. The term multi-year contract, I think I've heard enough times.
Yeah.
Multi-year contract is probably the most used term in MLS.
Due to club policy, the terms were not disclosed.
Yeah.
All right, let's park the hypotheticals for now. I want to talk to you three a bit about how the optics for TFC specifically looked prior to this hiatus, because we got the ball rolling. TFC stumbled out of the gates, recovered well. But as you mentioned, we've been saying for a while, the reporters specifically been saying for a while, this is the year, it's last kick at the can. So what could we have reasonably expected from TFC? And assuming we get to some semblance of normal, what's a fair expectation?
I think for TFC this year, like a lot of things had to break right. Like, Josie had to stay healthy. Him and Pozuelo had to click again. Piatti had to show that he could provide some kind of goal scoring, again, like an option that wasn't Altidore or Pozuelo. Bradley had to come back healthy. And they had to get reasonably good goaltending from Quentin Westberg, and Omar Gonzalez had to be, kind of, again, one of the best defenders in MLS that he has shown he's been throughout his career. So
sounds like a lot of question marks. That sounds like a lot of question marks.
But again, if all those things go right, you're looking at a team that you could say, yeah, they could probably beat Atlanta again. And it wouldn't, that's the thing, like it wouldn't have surprised anyone for TFC to have gone to the final. It wouldn't have surprised anyone for them to have been out in the first round. They were a playoff team. I still thought that there was something that was going to happen in the summer. I didn't think Piatti was it. Like I still felt like Piatti was kind of a stopgap, and that it wouldn't have surprised me if he would have been bought down either in the summer or at the end of the year and become a TAM player. I felt like the summer was when they should have added a player. Then you can kind of assess where you are and do you think you can make a realistic push? But yeah, Kurt, you're right. Like a lot of things had to break right. The biggest of which is, can you keep Altidore healthy? And that's that. I don't know. Have we seen what Altidore can really do throughout a full season? A lot was dependent on that.
Yeah, I'm be kind of brief on this, just because I've been out of the team now for a little bit. But for me, the back line, the back four, and the goalkeeping situation is at an MLS Cup level. They're at a championship level for sure. They've managed to replace Drew Moore with Omar Gonzalez, a World Cup veteran, somebody who's proven it in Liga MX and done it. But once you get further upfield, I mean, it's simply put, the squad just isn't anywhere near as talented as it was, 2 years ago when the Victor Vasquezes were there, when Javinko was there, when Altidore managed to be healthy and he was a complete beast through the playoffs, when Bradley had his best MLS season. So it's simple for me. Once you get ahead of the back line, they're nowhere near what they were a few years ago. And then you look at the additions, and I think they've missed on some additions. I think that's going to become clear and evident over the next year or two. I thought they needed a little bit of luck to get to last year's final. They got that. I thought they were outplayed throughout the playoffs. Could this team still do that and get back to an MLS Cup? Maybe, but I think a lot of things would have to break their way in the playoffs again.
But I actually disagree. I'm a lot more bullish than these guys on CFC. I think I agree that the back line is fine and you don't really need to worry about that. For me, the midfield of Delgado, Osorio, and Bradley down the stretch last year was the best in the league, and I don't think it was that close. Maybe LAFC you could put in there as well, but I thought that those three were outstanding. And I don't love the Piatti signing from a long-term point of view, but I think if he gets healthy, and that is an if, he will be a very good player in MLS, in my opinion. So I don't think it's a disaster by any stretch.
Well, I don't think they ever looked at Piatti as a.
I didn't say it was a disaster. I just said they could win MLS Cup again.
No,
I said a lot of stuff have to break their way.
Well, you said the midfield and attack was a long way from 2017. I'm not
it
sure.
Is. Victor Vasquez is one of the best midfielders in MLS history. He's no longer there. Like
I love that. I think Vasquez was the best player they've ever had. I love him. Pozuelo is also very, very good. For me, more than good enough to be that guy.
The problem that I see is like, how long, and all of us have heard this in our various times covering TFC about Vanny wanting to get wide. And if you look at the wide players he has now, they're still not the kind of players that can play at the level or in the kind of style he wants. So that's another question mark for me. And maybe you get there. Like maybe Piatti gets healthy, and like you said, Kurt, he's a great player. I don't think he was ever a long-term guy, but I still again, they got to MLS Cup with Tsubasa Endo as your wide winger, as one of your wide wingers. Like, and how sustainable is that, right? And like, were you going to rely on Jacob Schaffelberg again? Were you going to rely on an aging but capable Nick DeLeon? But the funny thing is like, Vanny has long talked about, and Bradley too. Like we've all heard a variety of Bradley kind of again and again, but when he talks about this team showing up in big moments, they did that. Like they got through the playoffs last season very much on the strength of their experience. Can you do that, through another playoff run? But that's kind of what Vanny and Bradley have in their back pocket. It's like, this is a team that's been there before. And again, it wouldn't surprise anyone if they were to do it again. That's where experience helps you, right?
And they were lucky in the playoffs last year, but they went away to Atlanta in New York City. Like you don't get through those two games without a degree of luck for me. Yeah. So I'm not saying for a second that it's as good as the 2017, because I think that was, at that time, the best MLS team ever and a team that really pushed the league forwards. But I still think it's a top team. And I think with Joseph Martinez out injured, I think it's probably the best team in the Eastern Conference.
Josh, sustainability is a good word there, because next one I'm going to ask you guys to do is to put on your Bill Manning cap and predict what the future might hold. If you had the reins, if you're in his position, how much longer is this plug and repair on the fly and trust the experience in the big moments going to be good enough? And at what point do you start to spend the money and start to really look at a rebuild, quote unquote, to stay at the competitive level?
Well, I mean, it should be obvious to anyone that's whatever read or followed anything I do. Like, I think they should have been planning for a rebuild for a long time now. But it's interesting you say Bill Manning. Like, I also think there's different kind of forces, or different people might want different things in the organization. Like, I think Ali Curtis, at least he said that he, and given his experience at Red Bulls, he kind of wants to build up through the academy. But I think it's also been proven that he's the guy, and Ollie, we've talked about this a lot. He's the guy that can go get things done. He's the guy that can take the vision and, from other people, and then go kind of do the legwork. I think Bill Manning always wants to be a big market team that signs, big name players. And I think Greg Vanney wants veterans. So you have a bunch of people that kind of want, at least it appears, different things. They all want to win. They all want to contend. They all want to, spend as much as they can. But, maybe to Ali Curtis, does that mean spending more in the academy? To Greg Vanney, does that mean just getting MLS veterans and maybe paying them more than they should? And to Bill Manning, does that mean maybe going out and getting the biggest star possible to increase revenue, right? So it's not just that, because if you're Bill Manning, you probably want to have some of the highest paid stars in the league every year, I would assume. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either if you're getting good value for it. So sustainability, I think we could probably stand to learn a little bit more about like what each person's vision is, and if there is the alignment that you would hope there is in a big organization, right?
Yeah. But the interview you did a few weeks ago with Vanny was really interesting, I thought, because that to me was when you asked him about his future, he essentially said there are certain things that he's going to want if he's going to stay at TFC. And I think that probably comes down to A, control over decisions, and B, finances, right? Like backing. And Piatti wasn't really a big splash in terms of the finances of it. So it's interesting. I agree that there's kind of a difference between Manning on the one hand, whose job is to fill the stadium and to win trophies and all the things that Larry Tannenbaum likes, and then Greg Vanney on the other hand, who is much more of kind of a soccer guy and has an idea in his head of how he wants his team to play and how he wants to use the academy, and a bit more of he's a bit more interested in that side of things as opposed to just trophies, right? So that to me is the interesting kind of divide, and whether or not they kind of give Greg Vanney the keys and give him control, I think will probably decide whether he stays or goes somewhere else, and obviously that decides the future of the club.
I'll take this question in a little different direction, just given Altidore has signed an extension with the team. Just throw this out there and see what your guys' take is on that. But was it a mistake to bring back Altidore, given the number of games he misses per season? Given some of the comments in the media, what's his contract up to now? $4 or $5 million a year.
Nearly 5, yeah, I think.
Potentially have missed the window to sell him on to a Liga MX, given that he's going to be 31 this year, I believe. So I wonder if the club, in terms of its payroll and personnel, has already been mismanaged to a certain extent. And then how do they get past that in the future? And I love Jozy Altidore. I still think, a year or two ago, I considered him the best number 9 in Major League Soccer. When he's playing and when he's on and when he's driven, he's unstoppable. But at the same time, has it reached a point now where you wonder what the future is, given the deal he just signed?
I agree with a lot of what you said, Kurt. But after kind of, you could say, mishandling the Giovinco thing and just letting Giovinco go, they were kind of put into a corner, right? And if you want to reassure fans, and even though they are owned by MLSE, they are still very dependent on the gate as well, and they want to keep interest in the team. And Altidore is a fan favorite, unlike any other. The South End love him. People love him. So optically, it was kind of a deal you had to make. And you always pay a lot for goals, fine. But
He's one of my favorite players. He's one of my favorite players, like of all time, from American players.
I don't love it considering how much he earns, but I also understand why you had to do it. Sometimes optics are at play here. And unfortunately, those are the realities of signing, big ticket players. I don't love it, but I you see why they did it, right?
You kind of do, but I still think it's bad management to kind of back yourself into a corner where you feel like you have to do something.
And we're only saying this too because he doesn't play 30 games a year. That's the only reason we're saying it, right?
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, but for me, the fans will get over stuff like these types of players leaving if you continue to manage the club in a successful way and you bring in more players to replace them, right? Like Pozuelo is already not okay. He's not on the level of a Giovinco, obviously, and I don't think anyone ever will be, but he's pretty popular. So for me, that was a little bit of a panic move.
Well, this comes back to our Greg Vanney conversation, right? Like I said it before, and I'm sure a few of us were there at that press conference when Ali Curtis was unveiled. We learned that Greg Vanney was the one that went down and kind of interviewed him, and they only interviewed one guy, and it was just Ali Curtis. And it was basically, it seemed that it was up to Greg Vanney to make that decision. It could be wrong, but that's what it appeared. So you wonder if again, this is a matter of, and like you said, Ollie, Greg Vanney clearly wants to have a lot of resources at his disposal. Was this a matter of Greg Vanney saying, we need this guy, like we've already been decimated enough, losing Vasquez, losing Giovinco, like we can't lose another one of these guys. I wonder. I don't know if that's the case, but you wonder.
Yeah, I maybe would have thought it was more kind of Curtis and Manning, not wanting to let another star go.
Marketability there, I think, comes in quite a bit to sell your stars.
And then I think Vanney still has an issue where he doesn't fully know how to fit Pozuelo and Altidore into the same team. That was one of the things that I think is a big question mark around the team this year.
Yeah.
Lots of question marks and no real answers to come up with over the next half hour. So let's move on to a little rapid fire. We'll go around the horn, chime in wherever you see fit. We'll start with our guest first word on all of our questions. And we know, but at this point, very well, Kurt and Ollie will chime in. Who has been the nicest player you've had to deal with or had the opportunity to deal with since covering TFC?
I mean, only because I'm first. I get to say Drew Moore.
Oh, I knew it. I know. I purposely said somebody else.
It's the 2-foot putt, and I want to get through as many of these questions as possible. So I'll take Drew Moore for 500.
Nobody can be that nice. I don't believe it. Oliver, go ahead.
The 2017 defense in general was just like remarkably nice. Like you had Hagland, Hernandez, Beitashour, Morrow, all really nice guys. I always, and not that he wasn't a nice guy, maybe not as always nice as those guys, but Alex Bono I thought was always friendly and pleasant. And when he'd had a bad game, he would stand up and talk and not get snippy. So you appreciate that as a reporter.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said Alex Bono. It doesn't even come to mind when I think of nice. I mean, he was always pleasant to me, but it wasn't like a over the top nice.
No, not necessarily nice, but I respected how he handled himself.
All right, I'm going with Ashton Morgan. Just through the decade, was just always there to answer questions. Never held anything you wrote against you, and he actually lives down by the CPL offices, somewhere around there. So I saw him at the coffee shop quite often, and he was always pleasant then. So I'm going to go Ashton Morgan.
Flipping that question on.
I saw Ashton Morgan just around the corner from our place, and I've seen Osorio in my neighborhood as well, and I'm always hesitant to stop them and say hello, but he was the one that stopped me. So there you go. That's a good vote.
There you go.
Mine looks way too easy in retrospect.
This one might be tougher, or something might come to mind right away. Flipping the first question on its head, who is the grumpiest player you've had to deal with?
Do I get to go first?
Yeah, we'll stay in that format.
Again, because it's the easy one here. Like I have to go Giovinco on this.
Okay.
When things were bad,
he is grumpy.
Here's the thing about Giovinco. And I don't fault him for this because he was raised in kind of a different way of dealing with the media. Giovinco would speak to us only when he had something to say. There were a lot of players that, and it's a very North American way to expect players to answer for every game. Like,
Everything, yeah.
in the NHL and the NBA, every player has to be made available, and I think that's awesome. I think that's fantastic. Javinko was waiting in the dressing room if he had something to say, and I always liked that because he would walk in and his stall was right beside the entrance. So when he walked in and he was sitting there, usually in a leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent, we were like, okay, we're gonna get something here. But if you wanted him otherwise, wasn't happening. Like,
translator's unavailable today. Translator's unavailable today.
I'll never forget him leaving after 2016 MLS Cup. That was just, so I'm going to go with Javinko, because if he was in a bad mood, you didn't want to get anywhere near him.
Altidore had a little bit of that in him as well. Not the grumpy for me, but just like sometimes he, where's Josie? We don't really know.
The funny thing about Altidore was when he gave that interview where he kind of ripped Bill Manning for getting rid of that trainer. I think it was early 2019. Yeah, last year, right?
Yeah, no, I think that was 18.
Was it 18?
It was 18.
Anyway,
yeah.
Regardless, it was like one of the first games after TFC had changed their locker room access. So they didn't let reporters go into the main bit of the locker room, but they had us go into a little side bit, which was technically part of the locker room. So Josie, to give that interview, had to consciously like walk out and come into the new scrum area and still stay fired and up enough to not think that was a bad idea. So that was good.
Okay,
Oliver, you want me to do it? You want me to go? All right. Any long-standing TFC fans out there will know I'm going to go with Damien Perkey, who verbally assaulted me in the locker room after a game once.
Did you deserve it?
No, actually, no. That time I actually did not deserve it, and it's still a lot of people to this day still don't even know why he decided to do that. I think I do know, but I still regret to this day leaving the dressing room, because I was asked to leave the dressing room and he got to stay in there with all the other reporters. If I would be as wise and mature as I am now, I would have just sat there and stared at him.
Michael Bradley style?
No, I just said I'm not leaving. I have every right to be in this dressing room. If you have a problem with me, don't talk to me, or you step out.
Yeah.
Can I add one? Sorry, Ollie, I don't want to jump the queue here.
No, go for it.
And it's interesting because like Kurt was around the team for like some pretty ugly times. Like I really started in 15 when, things were great at the club comparatively. I'm going to add Mo Johnston, even though I've never actually met him. I've told this story a few times, and like I sent out just in one sitting at this table I'm at now, sent out like 50 emails just in the matter of like 5 minutes, kind of a stock email asking if they'd like to participate in the book. And I went downstairs, came back up a few minutes later, and I had already gotten a response. It was Mo Johnston. He's like, I don't want anything to do with it, and I'm like, okay. And then a few days later, I had all this stuff on Mo, and I emailed him back again and said, look, you're the first coach. People have said all this stuff about you. It's probably important that you tell your side of the story. And he wrote me back again almost immediately, saying something to the effect of, I'm not going to do your email. Don't ever contact me again. He was my white whale.
It's funny because I understand the Mo Johnston TFC angle, but for me, Mo Johnston was a Kansas City Wizards legend who was playing there in the late 90s, who I like adored on the field, right? So it's funny.
There you go.
What was said to you that was so shocking? Like, why did he want you to leave?
Oh, he was yelling at. I mean, people. If you Google Damien Perkey, Kurt Larson, I think there's probably a story there from John Molinaro or Neil Davidson still floating around somewhere. But he was basically just yelling. He was yelling at me in French. So I unfortunately don't know what he was saying. I think it was related to an article I had written the previous week, relating to Ahmed Kantari doing something where I said he should have been red carded, and he didn't appreciate that I was writing such things about the team. So so he had to go at me in the dressing room, and it wasn't nice.
All right, so when you're done with the Player Pundit Hangout, check out, go Google that. I'm sure there's some weekend entertainment for you there. Okay, this one comes from the YouTube chat. B Colt asks, and this might be a tougher question to answer, but come up with a player. which TFC player should be loaned to CPL or is the most eligible, I guess, would be?
Yeah, it's got to be somebody who probably doesn't see any playing time right now in the MLS level, right? So no one's coming to mind immediately. So I don't know if the other guys have somebody that comes to mind.
I would say if it has to be someone on the first team roster and not TFC2, I would say probably someone like Julian Dunn, right? Someone who needs minutes and just quite frankly isn't going to get them for the first team right now.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking, it's interesting if we're talking about a shortened season, like let's say the MLS season is 15 games and every game is vital, then you're looking at probably a guy like Jaden Nelson, who I thought we would see Jaden Nelson in kind of the quieter games, you know, the home games against the Colorados where, you know, you could probably grind out a few points. He needs to play, and I know I'm looking forward to a discussion about young players at TFC, which I know is upcoming, but like these guys have to play. And I never really saw how he was. I mean, Greg Vanny told me that he was going to play this year, but I never really saw how that was going to happen. And it looks even less likely with a shortened season likely.
The thing with Jaden Nelson is I don't think they like to send out the ones that they think are their real gems because they have to go into someone else's care. So I don't know if they would loan him out, but
yeah, that's a good point.
That the minutes would be useful.
I think you also got to keep in mind that don't for a second think there wasn't hesitancy on TFC's part to work with the CPL early on and want to send players to Ottawa instead of CPL clubs who are nearby, just because of the certain business priorities. So don't think that wasn't there.
There might still be.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna speed through the rest of these rapid. No, not gonna get to all the rapid fires. I'm gonna trust my editorial judgment, but we'll stay quick. So an answer and a quick story because we want to get to our fun segment today, which will be your top 10 TFC players of all time. So to close the book on this rapid fire, who has been the most forgettable player you've covered?
Danny Califf.
Who?
Point to
Danny Califf, actually somewhat of an MLS legend, at least a dozen or so caps for the U.S. national team. Danny Califf didn't have a good tenure here.
Mine is someone who's actually gone on to do quite well for himself, but I thought was almost certainly USL bound when he left TFC, which is Dan Lovitz.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't forget him, but maybe others would.
I mean, mine's pretty fresh, and I'm bringing it up just because of the company that we have here. But like, if I was wrong about any player, it was Agar Keche. Like, I wanted him to work so bad. I wanted him to work so bad, and I'm sure I wrote some really laudatory articles about him because I just saw so much kind of on the ball with him, and it looked so promising. But boy, and then he vanished back into the Spanish second division, and I don't.
We're gonna do worst signing ever still.
We can do worst signing ever, but
that's my answer. Agar Keche.
Okay, agreed, Josh.
Sure. For the sake of rapid fire.
Okay, that's the problem with an hour-long time slot. Kurt, any disagreeing at all with Agar Keche? Worst signing ever?
To a certain extent, I disagree because the magnitude of the signing wasn't built up to be, say, a Jermaine Defoe, right? So I would actually argue maybe a Jermaine Defoe could be considered the biggest bust. Yes, I know he had a bit of a good run, but it was such a short run. And for what he was offered and what he was paid and the campaign around bringing him here, he has to be considered the biggest bust in TFC history.
Okay. We have a couple more, but we'll save that for another time. We have plenty of quarantine to get through. So let's move on to our top 10 TFC players of all time. I'm trying to think of the most efficient way to get this done because I'm sure the bulk of the players will be the same for a lot of you. The order might differ a little bit, but I think for the sake of time and efficiency while still having a good discussion over it, let's go through the squad. Everyone will give their list, and then if there's anything outlandish that you need to argue, get it off your chest. But for the most part, let's try and run this through. Josh, we've been starting with you the whole time, so let's flip that a little bit and give Kurt the first say at your top 10 players of all time.
All right. So I didn't find this that difficult, to be honest. I think that tells you about the state of TFC through the years, and I honestly, so how I did this was I started by just writing down, okay, who should be in consideration got through more than 12 to 15 names where I'm like, who should actually be considered? But my number 10 might be a bit of a surprise because he was only here briefly, but it was a big signing. He actually did quite well under the circumstances. So my number 10 is Torsten Frings.
Ooh. Obviously, I like that pick.
Yeah. Any disagreements? Any shock, or are we just moving on to Oliver's pick?
Just go through the list and then we can have a general reflection. Otherwise, we could spend a lot of time nitpicking at who's at 10 versus number 9.
Are we doing all our 10s? Or is Kurt doing? Okay,
yeah.
I've gone for a midfielder with a bit more pedigree than Torsten Frings, Marky Delgado.
Marky Delgado was on my just missed the top 15 list. All right.
I'm really upset that I have to go after him because I had Marky Delgado at number 10 as well.
Wow.
So before you were complaining that I was giving you the layups, and now you're complaining that you have to go last. What do you want, Kloke? I'm here for you, man.
No, this is quarantine life with me. A lot of complaining.
Nothing against Marky, but like if Marky's in your top, I know he's played a lot of games and he's played in a lot of big games. But if Marky's in your top 10, like your club history is not that great.
I'm going to add my honorable mention, Stefan Fry, and this is. I know I'm going to take a lot of heat for this. I have Pozuelo as an honorable mention.
Yeah, you have to. He hasn't played enough, man. You gotta have some.
He's been to an MLS Cup. He's my number 9 anyway. If you want to.
All right.
My list is based a lot on longevity. So yeah, my number 9. I had Deitch. I had Danny Dichio at number 9, probably for a bit of sentimental reasons, but anytime you can kind of create one of the rare viral moments early on in MLS history, Deitch is
yeah, I get it. I'm going with for number 9. I'm going for Drew Moore.
Okay.
So no one can argue with that.
No, I won't argue that. I've got Drew Moore at number 8, so I'm keeping it moving here.
Who do you have at 9, Ollie?
Pozuelo.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
I have Drew Moore at number 8 as well.
Okay, at my number 8, I liked Kloke's Fry shout, but I actually have Fry as my number 8. Played a long time, 2009 to 2013. Faced a ton of shots on goal. Aged probably 10 years. He was always willing to step to the mic. Unfortunate that they had to get rid of him because, as we've seen in Seattle, like he's a mainstay there, and I think had there not been some kind of disagreement over compensation, that he should still be in Toronto.
Yeah. Number 7, Mr. Platt.
Number 7. I don't think I really need to make the case here. Everyone knows, what he's meant to the club. So could have probably had him a couple of places higher.
Yeah, too low for me. I had D-Row at 7. I mean, he was there through some ugly years, and De Rosario is still one of. I think he's the only community rep or club rep for a reason, right? In a lot of ways, he is. TFC represents some of those lean early years.
All right, so we're on 7.
If you haven't seen it yet, there's a good feature produced by our fantastic editors and videographers on the Onesoccer YouTube channel on D-Row. So check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Kurt,
we're number 7.
Yeah,
you were on 7.
Yeah, Justin Morrow has to be on this list. All-star, had a fantastic 2-year run, still there, making a difference. Probably should have earned more appearances with the U.S. national team. So I'm going Justin Morrow, who is also a really nice guy.
He is, and he's also my number 6.
Wow.
I had him just ahead of Osorio, I think, at his best, and I think he is maybe starting his decline a little bit now. But at his best, I think he was the best player in his position in the league. So that kind of ceiling gets him above Osorio for me.
Where are we at? Are we at 6 now?
6,
yeah.
I'm going to catch. I agree with what both of you said earlier about him, but I had Victor Vasquez here, and and hold on, that's only because I value longevity. I'm a big Rolling Stones fan. I like bands that can. As in 2017 was, arguably there were points that season where he was the best player in the league. And if he had played he was hurt through a lot of 2018. And if he had stayed one more year, he's probably way higher on this list. This is not an indication of his talent, but just his longevity. So Vasquez at 6.
Kurtler.
That's it. Yeah, I have Vasquez much higher, but I have Jonathan Osorio as my number 6. Been with the club since 2011, 2012. He's been in all the big moments. Local guy. He deserves it. He's number 6.
Okay, shall I carry on?
Carry on,
Number
my friend.
5. Number 5, I have Dwayne De Rosario, the best non-modern era player for TFC, and by a clear distance in my mind. He was the best 11. He was an all-star. So for me, he was probably the one player who got to those kind of Giovinco levels before the Tim Wiki era started. So he's my number 5.
Yeah, number 5 for me is Oso. I mean, there's not much more that can be said about him. He's a club legend, and I like probably the reason that I had him higher, the rebirth of Jonathan Osorio. He's gone through so many ups and downs in his career, and TFC. I mean, we can talk like TFC don't win MLS Cup without Victor Vasquez. TFC don't get to the Champions League final without Jonathan Osorio. So
yeah.
True.
Yeah, he got paid because of it too. Yep. So now we're into the top 5. So I think when you're talking about TFC and what it meant to this team and what it meant to this city, De Rosario coming in was massive. Played really well for a few years here. Unfortunate how it ended. But yeah, De Rosario is my number 5.
Okay, so I think we're all going to have the same top 4, but it just depends on the order. Oh, no, wait, sorry. Josh has already said Vasquez, so he's out.
Yeah.
I have Vasquez. I was really trying to justify putting him higher because I think he is the best player they have ever had. But you have to when you're talking about greatest, you have to account for some longevity, and the other 3 have had obviously a bit more of that. So Vasquez is my number 4.
I had Justin Morrow at number 4. I know that left back is by far the least glamorous position out there, but just how long he's done it, and just, I'll echo Greg Van. He always wants his players at a 7, not a 2 one game, a 10 the next game, and that's what you get with Justin Morrow. I think if you watch him and only him, night after night, he does some really solid things, and just how long he's done it. That's why I had him so high.
4 is Josie Altidore is number 4 on my list, just because he's below my top 3 just because of the injury issues. Has he performed up to the level of his contract? I don't think so. Obviously, he's had some big nights and some big moments and scored some big goals, but he's also missed a lot of moments.
Okay. I have Altidore at 3. I think he's had, again, I say he has had more longevity in Vasquez. He's had some massive, massive moments for the club. He's been one of the top players in the league. So for me, that had to get him above Victor Vasquez. But certainly the other 2, who it will be no secret who we're coming to, I think have done it with a bit more consistency during their times at the club. So that's why he's.
I sound like I have a real hate on for Josie Altidore, even though yesterday in our chat with Jay Demerit, I stood up for him and said it's disgraceful how American fans are treating him. So I do have love for Josie Altidore. I'm just being critical right now.
Mr. Kloke.
I had Altidore 3 for all the reasons that we've discussed. I mean, they don't have the titles they do without him.
Okay, my number 3 is Victor Vasquez. Unfortunate that he didn't play here a little bit longer because, in my opinion, he is the best passer in Major League Soccer history. Yes, a better passer than Carlos Valderrama, Matt Doyle. But just the vision and his ability to complete the passes through that vision was amazing. I can still recall those long diagonals he managed to hit on the ground that somehow ended up in the path of Giovinco.
I can't believe he didn't get any love for friendliest player that we've dealt with. He was
he's a nice guy too.
You just felt lifted when you were around him. It made me want to move to Spain. It was, I'm not kidding.
He was. I haven't enjoyed watching anyone as much as I've enjoyed watching him in terms of TFC players. Okay, number 2, I have Michael Bradley. You can certainly make a case for him at number 1 in terms of the impact he had on the club. and is having on the club. So he is certainly a very worthy number 2, but doesn't quite make the top of my list. Wonder who it could be.
Do we agree, Josh?
Well, I think, and I wrote this after MLS Cup 2017, I think Bradley deserves consideration as like one of the best captains in Toronto sports history. You know, and if you're just talking to players about him, he probably drove a lot of players crazy, but I don't think they get through and just play as consistently as they did through 2017 without kind of him. Probably maddening at times to the players, but yeah, Bradley at number 2, no question.
Difficult for me. I put Giovinco at number 2, believe it or not. I'm not even trying to be contrarian here. And because I'll explain why when I give my number 1 pick, which is Michael Bradley. Giovinco was offered a new contract. He turned down that new contract. Was it greed? Was it selfishness? I'm not sure, but he had the opportunity to stay here and become an even bigger club legend, and he turned it down. So I'm going to go with the guy who wanted to be here longer, Michael Bradley, as my number 1.
I think for the next time that I hope I'm on, I think what warrants a discussion is whether or not signing like long term, like would it be good to have paid him $6 million again for the next few seasons?
No, but it would have. I think it would have been good to pay him if he, obviously he would have had to accept it, $4 to $5 million, and actually get rid of Altidore.
I don't think he would have accepted a penny less than what he was paid.
That's why he's number 2 for me.
Round it out, Josh.
Well, he's number 1 for me. For the simple reason that I think when TFC fans think back to this era between 2015 and 2018, I guess, Sebastian Giovinco is the guy they're going to remember in their brains. So he defines the era for me and is their best player ever.
Yeah, I mean, for me, number 1, Liam Fraser.
As expected.
Yeah. I think you could make a genuine case that Giovinco is one of the best players, maybe the best player in MLS history. And TFC were pretty fortunate to have him. And yeah, Giovinco is, you're right, Ollie, era defining is a good way to put it.
I do like the Giovinco idea for next time. Hopefully there's a next time we can have Josh on, but for the sake of clarity, let's get everyone to quickly start 10 through 1 just to make sure we've got the order intact. Kurt, start with you.
Thorsten Frings at 10, Drew Moore, Stephen Fry, Justin Morrow, Jonathan Osorio. My top 5 is Di Rosario, Altidore, Vasquez, Giovinco, Michael Bradley.
Oliver Platt.
10 to 6, I've got Delgado, Pozuelo, Moore, Osorio, and Morrow. And then 5 to 1 is Di Rosario, Vasquez, Altidore, Bradley, and Giovinco.
Josh.
I've got Delgado at 10, then Dicchio, Moore, Di Rosario, Vasquez, Osorio, Morrow, Altidore, Bradley, and Giovinco just sneaking in ahead of Liam Fraser.
All right. From our TFC experts today. Let us know what yours are. Tweet them at Onesoccer, but just be warned, disclaimer, anything you tweet at Onesoccer, you are inviting Kurt to disagree with you. So just brace yourself for that possibility. Okay, we have time for one quick question for Josh because we'll have Kurt and Ollie on longer, but we want to know, what is the dumbest TFC story you've written in your opinion, or one that you could take back?
Oh boy. That's a really good question. I wrote a dumb story about Chris Mavinga and slide tackling that and it's not like I don't know. I was just filling space and it really didn't, I don't know. It didn't really move the needle. And the problem was Chris Mavinga is a really nice guy, but he's also not the most talkative guy. I don't know.
I'm going to argue he slide tackles too often.
The fact that I'm even talking about it is dumb. So I don't know.
It's a fitting answer then. All right. That's all the time we're going to have for today. We'll certainly do our best to have Josh on again in the future. I got to ask about the vinyl behind you next time too, because there's so many questions I have.
I mean, the question I hear most often is, when are you going to play all these? When are you just going to stop? Play all the other stuff you have?
Make the collection work for you. Yeah. We appreciate everyone tuning in for free on these Player Pundit Hangouts. We appreciate the subscriptions as well to Onesoccer. I recommend everyone, if you're not already, get a subscription to The Athletic, some quality content. You can find Josh's work there. That'll do it for us today. For Kurt, Ollie, and Josh, I'm Adam Jenkins. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, like the video, share them with your friends, and join us on Monday when we return on the Player Pundit Hangouts.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Josh.
guys.